Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, dominating our news tonight is the Iran nuclear deal. We'll have those comments and questions associating that. But first, President Vladimir Putin and His Royal Highness of Saudi Arabia, King Salman, came together in Moscow to discuss how the two countries could cooperate to enhance the growth of both their nations. The two leaders talked about a wide range of topics, including trade, investments, economics, cultural, and humanitarian ideas, as well as their views on international issues.
And while the two countries have been talking and planning for many years, the visit showed their dedication to a prolonged partnership as they signed multiple agreements to work together in many different capacities.
Among these, a memorandum was signed in which Russia promised to sell the S-400 advanced anti-missile defense system to the Saudis. Now, in fact, the plans are for the Russians to provide them with the materials and capabilities to manufacture the S-400 in their own country. Now, these weapons will not only boost air defense for Saudi Arabia, but its capabilities as well.
Interesting. Russia has also made an agreement to supply Turkey with the S-400 system and potentially India in the coming years as well. Russia has also installed S-400s over the past 2 years. The missile defense system is there to protect the operations of Russian air forces, and some military experts believe this spreading out of the Russian S-400 system may balance out the tensions in the region because multiple countries have these defense deterrents.
Another major focus for the King's three-day visit was concerning energy. The two parties established a $1 billion energy investment fund with the participation of the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, Saudi Aramco, the Saudi Arabian Oil Company, and the Russian Direct Investment Fund, or RDIF.
The fund will finance projects in oil and gas fields to build petrochemical plants and liquefied energy plants in Russia. Russian companies also plan to provide drilling services to Saudi firms.
Because of their bilateral cooperation, the two leaders in the oil industry have managed to convince 24 countries, members of the OPEC and a non-OPEC group of countries, to stabilize oil prices. Now, this in turn could benefit both oil-dependent countries' economies as well as balance out and help to stabilize global energy markets.
President Trump has made up his mind on the Iran nuclear deal, but is keeping it tight-lipped. Some sources believe the president is in fact leaning toward decertifying that agreement. However, the Iranian president, Hassan Rouhani, says the deal is good and cannot be renegotiated.
In a CBS News interview, Ian Bremmer, founder and president of the Euro-Asian Group, a global political risk consulting company, said, "If other countries join us, the Iranians are off to the races in terms of nuclear capabilities, and they'd be quite quick about it. But I think much more likely would be that all of the others that are involved in the negotiations in the settlement, including our allies in Europe, in France, in the UK, would actually stick with the deal, and the Americans would be effectively out in the cold." So he's thinking only everyone else would stick with it, but if the Americans pull out, they're by themselves.
Right, right. Mr. Bremer expressed the only benefits to decertifying the agreement would be from the American people, saying Trump is being tough on a country that's clearly an enemy of ours. Well, Bremer continued, he personally wants out. He doesn't like the deal. He hated it when Secretary of State Rex Tillerson certified it the last time around. If you remember, Trump already said that the Iranians are not in compliance with the spirit of the deal, and said, frankly, they are probably not even in compliance with the actual deal, his words.
President Trump has instructed his national security advisors and Secretary of State to find a way to see if they cannot recertify but not formally pull out of the deal either. In other words, Katani's looking for a loophole so that he can still say they're pushing for the deal while in fact, pulling out.
Right. Lastly, Mr. Brimmer commented on how other countries feel about the president's comments. He said, in the Middle East, the Israelis, the Palestinians, the Qataris, and some of the other Gulf states have said that they feel that Trump individually is engaging with them and really wants to get peace. So they feel like that one-on-one interaction indicates they want peace, but that he wants to facilitate a deal. And he says, I wasn't hearing that from them, frankly, a month ago.
Well, for more on the Iran nuclear deal, we now turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee. Larry, what information have you been finding on this controversial nuclear deal?
The president's latest efforts have centered on trying to unravel, or at the very least remake, the deal that President Obama was able to forge with Iran. President Trump says Iran is not living up to the spirit of the agreement, and he has reportedly instructed Congress to fix it or he will scrap it. In a public statement, the president said that America will not proceed down a path whose predictable conclusion is more violence, more terror, and the very real threat of Iran's nuclear breakout. Rather than withdrawing from the deal altogether, however, the president has ordered Congress to alter the stipulations of the agreement according to its concerns and empower them with the option to impose sanctions for non-compliance. The agreement in question, properly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, but more popularly as the Iranian deal, is actually a multi-party agreement which includes at least 5 other nations. Amid President Trump's statements that he might still be thinking to scrap the deal, the agreement's co-signers have all expressed opposition, with Russia accusing the president of aggressive and threatening rhetoric. France, the UK, and Germany have jointly expressed that they have repeatedly confirmed Iran's compliance and have stated, moreover, that they believe it is in the nation's shared national security interest not to damage it. The president's position on the issue has reportedly placed him at odds with key members of even his own staff, and has also prompted strong comments from former high-level officials such as John Kerry, who accused the president of lacking common sense and maturity and manufacturing an international crisis, he stated, is a reckless abandonment of facts in favor of ego and ideology. The response of Tehran, which came within the hour, called President Trump's remarks abusive and downright wrong. Citizens of Iran, in listening to Mr. Trump's recent comments, say that the president seems crazy, really crazy, while their own president, Hassan Rouhani, says Donald Trump does not understand that the U.S. can't change a multinational agreement all by itself. So for that reason, he says Iran will stay in the nuclear agreement. The increase in hostilities between the two nations has reportedly dampened the hopes of the younger generation of Iranians who were looking forward to improved relations and possible economic benefits as a result. The only parties said to be pleased with the recent escalation are Iranian adversaries such as Saudi Arabia and the administration of Benjamin Netanyahu. Nonetheless, Iran's foreign minister tweeted on the issue that allegations, threats, and profanity won't intimidate Iranians. President Trump, he says, will discover this eventually. Other Iranian leaders are reportedly promising a tough response in the event that America were to break its word and pull out of the agreement, with some lawmakers suggesting that the move would lead to global chaos. Harbingers of that might have been seen in the deep dives of Iranian currency that have occurred in anticipation of aggressive measures by the U.S. Seeing itself as a possible target, the leader of Iran's Revolutionary Guard stated that if there are new sanctions against his organization, then the U.S. had better move its military bases 1,000 miles back from Iran's borders. The bottom line, analysts say, is that Tehran really needs foreign investment to stimulate its economy and create jobs for its growing population, and the comments coming forth from the White House are only going to serve to drive away investments and hurt Iran's prospects. The optimism expressed in Iran's parliament, however, is that there are other signatories to the agreement. The international community has not taken President Trump's strategy seriously, and Iran, they say, is prepared for all scenarios concerning the 2015 nuclear deal. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, thank you for that report, Larry. Moscow has a complaint regarding the U.S. and its military deployment along one of its borders, saying that it also violates a key act with NATO. Yes, the U.S. introduced a second regiment in the Baltic region in Poland, a move that Moscow says violates the peace treaty signed between Russia and NATO long ago that was put into place to end decades of Cold War tensions. Well, the Russian Defense Ministry spokesperson thinks that move undermines Russia's security by surrounding it with hostile forces.
Igor Konashenkov, a Russian Defense Ministry spokesman, said, in contrary to the claims of NATO and the U.S. on the insignificance of the troops approaching the Russian border, in fact, it's not a brigade there, but a U.S. mechanized military division. While, on the other hand, the U.S. Pentagon spokesman Dana White said that the U.S. is in those places as a defensive posture and that they are very clear about that, and if anyone who sees it anything differently would be wrong.
Well, the U.S. also said that this just is a part of the troop rotation, but of course a rotation doesn't necessarily mean that the troops are leaving out of that area and going back to their homes in the U.S., but they're in fact being moved to another location in the Eastern European area. In this case, it's Romania. Russia has said that it reserves the right to bolster its military troops as well, if need be. And when Poland was asked how it feels about the situation, well, it says that they have actually called for more U.S. defense forces in the area to protect it from what they call external threats. Now, these comments came from Poland after the Russia-Belarus military drills that were recently held. Those exercises caused a lot of heightened speculation in the international community, about the Russian troops in Belarus.
Well, the head of the U.S. Special Operations Command, Tony Thomas, said in July of those exercises, they're about to do an exercise in Belarus that could entail over 100,000 troops moving into that country, and the great concern is that they are not going to leave. Well, after those exercises, the Russian troops returned to their permanent bases, but ironically, the U.S. troops that were there in Poland are there to stay.
The very thing that they're worried about the Russians doing, they're actually doing
That's
themselves. Right. Interesting. Lastly, remember U.S. President Trump said that Iran wasn't living up to its nuclear agreement and that they were thinking about pulling out of or canceling that Iran deal. Well, the High Representative of the EU, Federica Mogherini, said recently that the IAEA has verified 8 times that Iran is implementing all its nuclear commitments following a comprehensive and strict monitoring system, and there have been no violation of any commitments included in the agreement so far.
The deal continues to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, represents a key and functioning pillar of the international non-proliferation architecture that is even more important to preserve a time of nuclear threat. Mogherini said that they believe they have a collective responsibility to preserve it for our own collective security.
Now, she kind of rebuked the U.S. regarding their comments to pull out of or to cancel the agreement, saying that the JCPOA was not a domestic issue, but a UN Security Council issue, and that the international community and the EU has indicated that the deal is and will continue to be in place. She also said that the EU will continue to support the Iran nuclear deal and all its provisions, along with the rest of the international community, for the benefit of all, including the Iranian people.
Representative Mogherini answered when asked regarding the termination of the agreement by the U.S. She said, "To my knowledge, there's not one single country in the world that can terminate a UN Special Council resolution once it has been adopted. Even more so, adopted unanimously implemented and verified with the rest of the international community continuing to support and implement it. So it is clearly not in the hands of any president in the world to terminate an agreement of this sort.
And lastly, she closed by saying regarding the agreement that the President of the United States has many powers, but not this one. So he doesn't have the power to cancel this agreement. Well, for years, experience has proven that agreements made by men not educated in the ways of true lasting peace never result in benefits for all parties involved. Mankind without a righteous body of laws to follow and a strict guide to direct their ways will always follow the path of destruction. The fact that we even have the nuclear weapon is evidence of that. But there is a guide in this generation of destruction who's teaching the way of life and not death. Yisrael Hawkins and the House of Yahweh is that guide. To find out more information about that, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, www.yahwehsbranch.com, or visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. For any emails, you can email at info@yahweh.com. Any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, we'd like to remind you of two absolutely free Bible study tools on the market today, the Yisrael Says program and the Ask Yisrael program. You can learn more about these two programs by going to www.yisraelsays.com and www.askyisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.